I had the pleasure of attending the 14th annual Chicago Jazz Festival, and this week I have the even greater pleasure of welcoming us all to the 17th season of Mountain Moving Coffeehouse. And we make it happen. Tonight we have a really great show, Lesbian Herstory Storytelling. This is the second year that we've done this event. This year the event is a benefit for Sinister Wisdom. If you don't know Sinister Wisdom, there's some sample copies on the table back there, as well as a lot of other wonderful exhibits. Please take a look at them at break time if you haven't had time to see them yet. We have a lot of great stories, and I'm as eager to hear them as you are, but of course first we have some announcements. There's a lot of announcements. I'm going to go through them real fast. First though, let me tell you what's coming up at Mountain Moving Coffeehouse. And as you know, Mountain Moving Coffeehouse is women's space. It's been women's space for 17 years. It's for women-born women and children. I'm told that this year there will be 2 radical new policies at Mountain Moving Coffeehouse. Well, not very radical. One is that we're attempting to start on time every week. At 8:30, and we're doing it this week, right? The other one is that we'll be closed the last Saturday of every month. The programs, and there's some on the table if you don't have one, explain it more, but that's a new thing for this year. We're sorry that we have to do it. It's an economic necessity. But coming up, next Saturday, Jamie Anderson, a wonderful performer. On October 3rd, the program is Rise Up Women Again. It's a theater production. October 10th, Karen Williams. Yeah. October 17th, Aquila Black Woman Trio Plus. October 24th, Sleeveless Theater. There's programs on the table there. Please take one and take a look at what's coming up. Also, you can see there's a whole lot of things here. I'm going to just tell you very briefly what I've got here, and I'm going to put these on the table back there. If you're interested, please take a look. We have workshops on women survivors of violence. There's a lesbian variety show in Madison, Wisconsin. There's a Crossroads conference on political organizing at Roosevelt University. The Gay and Lesbian International Film Festival coming up in November. There's an art exhibit at the School of the Art Institute on AIDS and HIV. There's a Take Back the Night March in Lake County. Howard Brown Clinic seminars on contemplating parenthood for lesbians. 1993 March on Washington for lesbian, gay, and bi equal rights. The Crossroads organizing seminar. There's another seminar, a weekend retreat sponsored by Chicago Catholic Women. We've got the Lesbian Community Cancer Project, and the Lesbian Community Cancer Project wants you to know that starting this month, on the 3rd Tuesday of every month, will be a free health screening program for all lesbians, free to all lesbians, regardless of means, and it talks about, well, if you want to know more about it, see Marcy. She's over there at the soundboard. That's all, and I'm going to put these back on the table for you to take a better look at them. So you know tonight's storytelling event, I got to tell you one thing about it. We're videotaping the event tonight. It's important to tell you for 2 reasons. One is that there's a video-free zone back in these 3 rows here. If you don't want the camera to look at you, it won't. And you can sit back there and you're video-free. The other thing is that copies of this video will be available for sale. There's some order blanks on the table over there. They're pretty cheap considering, so take a look at that, and we're ready to go. Oh, by the way, my name is Mikal Brody, and I'm one of the co-producers of Tell Us a Story Productions, and my partner is over there, Mark Das. Thank you. First storyteller is Leah Pastor. She wants you to know that she's one of an elite few lesbians to come out at a respectfully early age. Leah Pastor.
I came out when I was about 6 years old. So, anybody else? Any other young lesbians out there? So naturally, I needed some inspiration, being so young, and it was pretty limited at that time. Also, being a young Leo, I assumed I invented it. Women loving women. In my case, girls loving women. I like my teachers and counselors and my mother's girlfriends. Also, it helped. I was raised in an Orthodox family, so I was surrounded with women at weddings. They were segregated. The women were on one side, and the men were on the other. So that was a lot of fun. And at synagogue, all the women prayed together. And at funerals, all the women mourned together. So it just seemed natural that women liked being with each other. So I was really disappointed when I found out that it was the patriarchal law that established that the women had to be segregated. So my motivation to keep me going, it was in the early 60s, and there were these movies that were coming out, like The Children's Hour and Girls in Uniform. And so, you know, those weren't really uplifting lesbian movies. And my mother, who was a lousy censor, would like allow me to watch these things late at night. And I remember not wanting to, you know, end up like Shirley MacLaine, you know, dangling from a rope. So I just think that, like, now as an adult, it's logic and politics and emotions that keeps me loving, you know, women. Whereas then it was a lot more primal. I was so young, it was just like something inside that I think we all have that never goes away. So I think I was enjoying thinking about this and remembering these instincts that just kept me going and kept me, you know, strong. And as much as society and family would bombard me with trying to live the normal life, which seems so much more easier, it just wasn't easier. It's so much easier, you know, being who I am. And loving the women. So that's my story for this evening.
I forgot to introduce our singer this evening. It's Miss Bartlett. And we're really glad you're here. We're really glad you're here. And also, I'm really glad to see all y'all. I know we have Sweet Honey and the Rockies in town tonight, so I'm happy that there's anybody here at all. I would be at Sweet Honey myself. Next storyteller is Kay Miles. She's a Chicago lesbian. She has been since 1975. We even have a multimedia show for you tonight. Yeah.
Hello. I have to keep this microphone pointed away from the speakers, so I'll partly have my back to you, but I hope everybody can see the slides. I want to talk a little about lesbian space and how important it's been to me as a lesbian. The slides I'm showing are of the Michigan Women's Music Festival when it was being held on land near Hesperia. It was held on this land for 5 years, from 1977 to 1981. And most of these photos are taken around 1979 and 1980. You'll probably recognize some of the gals. By 1979 and 80, the festival was pretty well organized. There were no color-coded armbands yet, or separate camping for RVs, but things were pretty smooth. I remember the first Michigan festival we went to in 1976. We heard about it at a lesbian conference in Iowa City. We thought, what a great idea, women's music, lesbian performers, being together for days with lesbians on the land. So several of us packed up and headed off. We didn't really expect, though, I didn't expect, as we drove toward Michigan in 1976, what a profound effect it would have on me. Being away from men for several days, camping on the land, having the vision of lesbians everywhere around me. Granted, the first year, the food never got cooked. We ate raw corn and raw potatoes. The porta potties were always full to overflowing. There was a view of the shower area from the public road. And several times each night, a woman's voice would call out, "There's men on the land!" And we all get up and charge toward the area where an intruder had been sighted. But there were no confrontations. In fact, it was wonderful. It was so wonderful, so peaceful, exciting, and safe. It was beautiful to see women's bodies, to hear women's laughter and music, to see women dancing and chatting and kissing. It was beautiful to walk through the forest and come upon women who were dancing and playing music, drums, spontaneously singing, to shop for women's crafts, to go to sleep to the sound of women talking, and to wake up to the sounds of women laughing. At that first Michigan festival, my heart and my mind opened up in a new way. When we left the festival, the patriarchy looked different. It looked like a foreign country. And I never saw the world the same since then. that's my story. Thank you.
Wow, some of the women that I recognize, I don't think we look any different, and then I see those pictures here. Right. Karen Hutt is the project director of the upcoming Africa exhibit at the Field Museum. She has lived in Chicago for 4 years after moving here from Boston, and she's going to talk about contradictory role models for a butch who wanted a butch.
Talk right into it like this? Okay. I've been out for 20 years this summer. So I guess I have some stories to tell. At 14, 1972, growing up in Philadelphia, I came out loudly, quickly, with a vengeance. I was out, I was proud, and I want everyone to know. I knew then I had a lot to learn, and I wanted to learn it all very quickly and fast as I could from as many people as I could. I knew, too, that it was going to be very important to gain all this information in a very quick summer, because there might be some kind of force that would push me back in before school started in the fall. In high school, for those 4 years, I had a whole lot of lessons and activities and field trips and excursions that my parents and teachers knew nothing about. They never signed permission slips for me to go to certain places, but I went to them anyway. The curriculum I wrote was my own, and the only grade I received was whether or not every day I could have meaningful and consistent eye contact with as many women as possible, on the bus and on the train and at school and on any kind of other place that I went into. One of the things that was really complicated too was that as an African-American lesbian living in an affluent Jewish and black neighborhood in Philadelphia, I had lots of contradictory role models. They were many, but they never seemed to all fit together in any one kind of package. But I took them all in. For hair, at the time, I had the Angela Davis look. For clothes, living near an Ivy League university, I took a little prep, but I also took something from my white lesbian, separatist, feminist sisters into having basic, sensible earth shoes, khaki pants, flannel shirts, and a sensible military belt, just in case. For language, I learned to rap from the brothers in the neighborhood. I had to learn how to turn a phrase to get people to talk to me, what the meaning of double entendre meant, and also how to always have a comment for every scene, every moment, every situation. I learned how to rap. For dancing, I took a lot of my steps from James Brown, but I also took quite a few from John Travolta. Night Fever, the Bee Gees. I loved it all. I had moves, I had steps, I had routines that I practiced in the mirror before I went out. And I went out often because I was butch, and I knew it, and I was proud of it. But I also knew that I was going to need some refinement, some training. By the time I was 16, I was kind of rough around the edges, and people weren't responding to me the way I wanted them to. So over the years, I was to have a number of other courses in butch training. Many teachers I had impressed me, but the first one, in Butch Training 101, was the one that I always remember. Her name was Mi Lin. She was a Chinese African-American dyke who was a luggage handler out at the airport. She was strong, she was smart, she was an artist, she was funny, and she could do all kinds of things that I wished I could. She could pee standing up and not get her pants wet. She could light a match and not break the stick on her zipper. She could do everything that I always aspired. She taught me how to hold my liquor when I went out. She taught me how to stroll and how to linger. She told me how to approach a woman and ask her to dance, but also how to walk away gracefully if she said no. She taught me how to buy presents if I messed up, and how to always show up with a rose if I was late. She taught me how to be a lot of the things that I needed to know at that time. I needed to know how to set the mood to make love. I didn't know. I didn't know what to do when the house was mine. So she taught me how to light a candle and put on Luther. But one thing that was a hitch in all of this butch training that I got is that I always wanted to fuck my butch buddies, but I never could. It would have broken the rule, the code. I would have definitely been out of line if I would have ever expressed that. I then realized that it was similar to a lot of my gay male friends in high school who were being called faggots all the time in the locker room. They couldn't express that, the desire that they had for those other boys. They had to keep it under wraps. I did the same. But I always wondered what it would have been like if me, Lynn, would have asked me to dance. That's it.
Shelley is the videotaper, and she's also going to tell a story. It's not her story, it's the story of her friend Reggie, and she did an oral history interview with her friend Reggie and edited it, and she's going to tell Reggie's story now. This is Shelley.
Came out in 1967. And she says, I went to the Lost and Found before I came out. A girl I worked with brought me out. She told me about the place, and she also told me that she was gay. She was afraid that I wouldn't speak to her anymore, but I told her that had nothing to do with it. Besides, a few months later, I thought I was gay too. So she told me to go to the club, and I went, but I didn't know anybody there. But I liked it so much, I went back the same night. Then I started meeting people. Every time Shirley introduced me to somebody new, I'd run into the bathroom and write down, Nancy, blonde hair, or Judy, black hair. You know, different names, so I could remember, because there were so many people. But it was strict in those days. The cops always came in. They were always there. And you know, you couldn't do anything in those days. You couldn't even hold hands or slow dance. We used to go to Calumet City to go dancing. They didn't stop you out there. Women could wear pants, but not shirts that buttoned the wrong way. If you wore Levi's with the tag on it, at the bar, you had to rip the tag off. Way back before I came out, a girl was a femme and a butch was a marge. They didn't call them marges when I came out, but my girlfriend was a butch. She wore a sweatshirt all the time. Sometimes we dress up and wear pantsuits on weekends or New Year's Eve. This gay guy I knew would come to my house just to get me out on New Year's Eve. My mom thought I had a date with him, but he would take me to the bar instead and drop me off. The only places we had to meet women were the club, Calumet City, or the guys' bar, the 21. We used to go to the 21 after hours. They didn't like the girls coming in there because the real dykey ones would start fights. I was the only one that was allowed in there because I never caused any problems, but I felt like I was the only girl in there. I'll never forget this one night I was in the Lost and Found. This guy I worked with, Bob, came in, and I thought, oh shit. So I snuck out through the basement and went to this other straight bar until he left. He did this about 2 times that night. He'd come into the bar and I'd have to go out through the basement. One Sunday night I went to the 21, the guys' bar. There was nobody in there, so I walked all the way to the back, and there's Bob. I never knew he was gay. You figure in a girls' bar, a man walks in, he's looking for something. But in a guy's bar, you know damn well they're gay. Another way we would get together is house parties. One of my girlfriends used to have parties after the bars closed, and we would go over there and party all night. I never stayed home. I always carried a suitcase to the bar. I would either stay over or go to a motel because I didn't want to go home. But the cops were always at the bar, checking up to see if anything was going on. And if so, they'd close the bar. The cops used to wait outside the door when you left the bar to see if anything was going to go on outside. I knew the sergeants and I knew the vice squad. One cop even knew my boss, but they could never find anything wrong. Shirley had a clean bar, and the cops couldn't do anything, they couldn't touch her. That's why the cops were always there. I'll tell you one thing, if Shirley didn't run the bar the way she did, that bar would not have been open all these years. She was strict and she kept an eye on the girls. She was very good and we respected her for that. Her bar was the one, plus the 21. All the other bars would close. And CK was good in her bar because she kept the pot out. I remember she used to get on the speaker and say, I catch anyone smoking pot in the bathroom and you're barred. You'll never get in again. Now, almost anything goes. It's so easy to open a bar, but it was so hard to get a license then. I never knew way back then that the owner was the only one allowed to work behind the bar in the 60s. You couldn't have anybody behind the bar unless it was the owner. But it is better now. They can't fire you for being gay, at least here. I remember there were 2 girls caught in a raid, and they were on the front page of the Tribune. They were fired from work, but they got lawyers and said they were with 2 men, and they just happened to walk into the bar. They did get their jobs back, but nowadays they wouldn't say anything about it. There wasn't nothing to do except the bars and house parties. We had no place to go. Now you have coffee shops, different meeting places, and gay churches. There was nothing like that in the 60s.
I forgot to tell you something else. There's a theme to this evening's program. You probably figured that out already. That the theme is a very broad theme. We call it Beyond Coupledom. It's about what besides love relationships sustains us, or in the past sustained us as lesbians. There's a lot of things that don't always get credit for keeping us going. We tend to get focused on love relationships, and there's so much more than that. Now we have so many things, Michigan and all kinds of stuff. And in the past we had things too, not so many, and they were different. And that's one of the things that we're trying to present tonight. We're going to do one more story and then take a break. So before we do that, I want to tell you, entice you about some of the exhibits and things that we have around the room, and we'll give you an extra long break to give you an opportunity to take a look at them. We have a video that's, I think it was converted to video from a home movie of women in Chicago Women's Graphics Collective, and also Helen Victoria Press doing what they do. And next to that, a little photo exhibit on Iowa City Women's Press and a fine bind. Remember that freedom of the press belongs to she who owns press. And there are some books, some lesbian lesbian written and produced books, and Sarah Holman is back there with a book that she wrote, a book that I wrote, and some other stuff, so take a look at that. I told you that this evening's program is a benefit for Sinister Wisdom, and there's some sample copies of Sinister Wisdom and some order forms, because I know you'll want to rush right out and buy a subscription. You really might. Gerberhardt Library, one of the most wonderful resources in Chicago, has an exhibit back here. Check them out. And the regular Mountain Moving Literature table, and I'll have all those announcements and things that I talked about before. Also, there's a representative from Carol Mosley Braun's campaign. She's selling sweatshirts and t-shirts, and go visit her, put a little money into the campaign. It's important. What else? I'm sure I forgot something else, but I'll have an opportunity to tell you later. So now, I want to present to you Donna Rose. Donna Rose wants me to tell you that she's the poetic type. I know this is true. She co-penned the Cotton Dam series. She produced performance pieces. Oh, Donna, I can't read this. Musings of Mad Women and Enraptured. And she's still working on a chapbook. And here's Donna Rose.
Hello. When Martha called me and she was asking me to do her a favor, she kind of slipped in this request. It was really nice too, because I was tired, and so I was like, yeah, oh yeah, that's not a bad idea. Yeah, that's not a bad idea. But before I get started, I better get this out of the way too. I wanted to take this opportunity to invite everybody to a roast toast. There's a certain taco entrepreneur in our community. And so if there's anything that you ever wanted to say to her, the stuff that you say behind her back when her head's turned or whatever, this would be your perfect opportunity. It'll be tomorrow, Sunday, September 13th from 7 to 10 at Paris Dance. And $5 at the door. So there's some flyers on the table, so help yourself. And also, since I'm an egomaniac type of wench, I'll be opening, I just want to let you know, opening for Karen Williams October 10th here at the Coffee House. Should be a wild evening. Okay, now I'll get into this particular story. I thought it was kind of interesting in terms of like the things that sustain us, because of course you always tend to measure your life in terms of the women who entered it. I mean, if you're lesbian. And so it was kind of hard to think of what other kinds of things sustained me. And the places that women went to was my second choice. And I started off as a diapling type when I was 4 years old. That's when I remember being with a young cousin who was like 6 years old. And all of the parents and the adults were in the front part of the house, and all the little ones are supposed to be in bed. Like the 4 to the 6-year-old cousins were supposed to be in the bed. And I remember, man, we started getting into this serious exploration. And I remember thinking, wow, we hit upon something. So it was always like the bedroom at my cousin's house, because they had so many kids, and they always had bunk beds, and I thought that was really cool, so you had the perfect excuse to sleep two in the bed. And then my other favorite place for picking up women was St. Anselm's Grammar School. And as a good Catholic girl, I had a particular friend or two. Alicia DeCoudreau. I hope this woman isn't doing anything really heavy duty, so but really, she was a gorgeous girl, and she used to walk me home, because there was a public school right around the corner from us, and they used to always come by and kick our asses, because we were Catholic school kids. And on the South Side, you really didn't get a lot of props in those days for being Catholic. You were Baptist and died. But Alicia would walk me home. Now, she lived on 95th and Princeton. She had to take a bus. And this was on 58th and Indiana. So she figured she had enough time to walk me home and make it for the bus. She did. And I remember what was so neat about the whole little exchange was that she would carry my books. And if we passed by the store and she had like an extra quarter or something, she would always buy me that push-up. Man, ooh, I was in love. So it was always really nice going by the school lot, because if Alicia was willing, I'd be willing. And then there was this place at the corner of our block, and we just referred to it as the back. It was the only building on the block where the people really didn't work, and you know, there were 9 million kids always running through the backyard and this kind of thing, so we would go to the back. And this woman's name was, well, girl, Rose Ellis. Now we're about 8 or 9. And I remember we would like kind of be leaning up against the door to the basement, and we would start by, she would kiss me, I'd kiss her back, she'd kiss me, I'd kiss her back, she'd kiss me, I'd kiss her back. And then she'd start touching. Well, she'd touch me, I'd touch her back. She'd touch me there, I'd touch her back there. And man, I don't know what we were doing, but we would get tired. And I'd be like, man, it's like 3 hours later, I gotta get home. That's because we didn't have the language for like orgasm and all that, you know, tribalism and all of that, you know. And even though I didn't have language, I knew that what I was into, I couldn't like tell my mom about it. And I couldn't really tell any of my other girlfriends, you know, because you have your sets of girlfriends, your good girlfriends, your Catholic school girlfriends, your girlfriends from the back. Yeah. Well, I've always been a, you know, democratic type. But then I remember, like in 8th grade at St. Anselm, something happened that let me know that maybe I would have to really be cool about, you know, what I liked. And there was a girl there, her name was Jessica, and I thought she was beautiful. I mean, wow, she was taller than me. Hey, I've been this tall since I was about 10. And Jessica was taller than me, gorgeous. But everyone used to call her funny, so I'd be like, wow. And I found myself kind of calling her funny too, just so that they wouldn't think about me. And that bothered me. But it didn't stop me from doing it. So now we flash up to Academy of Our Lady, 95th and Troop. Oh, baby, that was a hotbed of licentiousness. And I remember there was another girl, I can't even remember her name, really tall, red hair, freckles, and she was funny. And they talked about her. And I remember thinking, well, if I'm going to be funny, I better keep this funny business to myself. And so I was like that. And I mean, I had one girlfriend in particular, Judy Profundi. I don't know whatever happened to her. But we used to like steal each other's parents' cars to go joyriding. And I remember the first time I ever ditched school in my life, I went to see Judy at Western Illinois because she was 2 years older than I. And we didn't do anything, but man, it was like I could smell her skin. We're both like sweating, and nothing happened. I don't know what happened to her. Probably just as well. And then, toward my last year in high school, during some other types of experimentation, you know, I kind of ended up with the neighbor down the street, and I was like, damn, it took me to become a mother to realize I don't want to do that shit again. I think I'd better stick with this lesbian thing. Or at that time we were calling it bisexual. That was sort of like introduction to lesbianism. You were bisexual. Somehow it didn't sound as hard. And so I was calling myself all these kind of names. There was a place on the south side. I heard about it on the radio way back when, if anyone can remember WSDM, there was all these really hot-voiced women doing the announcing. And there was a commercial, and it went like, sisters, come on down to the Mark III, the Mark III, the Mark III. I'm like, did I hear that? So me being a bold soul, I stole my daddy's car. I pull up, I think it was like on 75th and Cottage or 73rd. I pull up and I saw so many beautiful women going into this dark, dank place. Looked like fun. Big white cars, Cadillacs, oh, the women had nice pantsuits, dresses, hair whipped up for days, painted. I thought that's the place for me. But I didn't have an ID. So what I would do is like steal my father's car and park out in front and just watch. Because I figured eventually somebody would see me. Shit. It didn't happen. And then now we're flashing up to about maybe 20. No, maybe not even that old yet. Someone took me downtown, and there was this place called Ms. I think it was maybe on Clark. And I was like, God damn! Whoa, there were women everywhere. You name a flavor, they had it. Good-looking women everywhere. And I know I looked like, I should have had a sign around my neck that said hick. Because I was like, woman asked me if I wanted a drink. I don't know what I said. Something lame like, what was that stuff? Champagne and grenadine. Yeah, really. So that closed down, and I was heartbroken. They had some other little spots on the south side. I wasn't too keen on them, though. There was this one, Helen's, over east on 75th, maybe near Drexel. And at that time, everybody had their little regulation outfit. You had a little short crop fro, painter's pants, and fried boots. Handkerchief optional. So I go sashaying up into Helen's. I should have known something was up because no one looked like me. I mean, you had women that, like had night scarves from back here all the way. And then there were women, they had like fingernails like that long. But I was like, well, what the hell, maybe this is what you got to do first. So I go in there, and a girlfriend went with me. And we both have the little short crop froze, and everyone looked at us like we came from Mars. And I thought we were looking pretty good. Jeans fitting, we were about 20 pounds lighter then. And so I remember we found 2 seats at the bar, having a drink, trying to act like we blend in. And then this really big butch woman, I mean, she made me look like Twiggy, okay? She goes, if I thought you were a butch, I'd make you get up out of that seat. So I told my girlfriend, girl, pass me the lipstick. That was Helen's. I was definitely out of my league. And then there was the House of Fun on 79th Street, which was really weird because it was a straight place by day or during the week, and then maybe one night out of the week it was a gay joint. And I'm in there with some woman, we're dancing, drinking. I spent about $50, that's cutting into my, new clothes money, trying to impress this woman. And then the proprietor, I think it was Edna, she came over. Excuse me, now me and this woman, now that I've properly impressed her, we're dancing slow and, being really beautiful on the floor. She's like, we don't do any of that here. And I'm like, excuse me, why didn't you tell me that before I spent my money? And she was saying that they had problems with the neighborhood, so that really kind of killed it for me, even though I've had some wonderful times there. Just really kind of killed it for me. And so I kind of like migrated north, did the Den 1 thing. And that was really a nice place until the head started coming in. And that kind of ruined it for me. And now I tend to, I've had my times, checking out the nightlife and all like that. And I don't know, maybe it's because, I got this serious woman in my life, and maybe the fact that I'm fast approaching 40 and the knees don't like to bop as much as they used to, so I'm keeping my black ass home a lot more. But what I wanted to do, I couldn't resist it, and I hope I'm not going over, but I'd like to read you this new piece. And of course, it's dedicated to my beloved, who cannot be here because she's at home packing. And it's entitled My Contradiction. And it goes, I had always thought that my life would follow a prescribed plan, initiated by me, I thought. And some ethereal mist would like billow from the ground over the path that I should take, I thought. Some preordained destiny would drive me or ride me. Lust, I have found, has never been my only jockey, but not a bad ride, I would say. My happiness would be showered down upon my shoulders, joy unbridled, riding roughshod, ensnaring all in its wake, and tears and sweat, mingled with the most effervescent of wines, I believed this. But much to my dismay, I discovered there was never a guarantee. Nothing is ever certain except those changes. Even money won't change you, but time will definitely take you out. And so, my muse refused to converse with me at first. And then I would grasp at whoever offered some semblance of solace and understand that I would ultimately decide my own method of punishment. And it always seems that loneliness is a good a choice as any. But then I met with my own personal contradiction. She, not he, always a she. And she was so open and without guile, generous even, completely, totally without fear, because she said hi. And though I had known who she was, I really didn't know who she was, other than the entity for whom my outlook would change. Maybe somehow I allowed myself this change. I don't know. I didn't know that your advent would signal my beginning. I couldn't know that I would crave those brown orbs that speak to me in such a compelling way. But my contradiction informed me that I was to know that her hands would touch me in those places I had thought to be so well protected, and unsuspecting, I would yield. And I didn't know that in my loneliness I had called her to me. I thought I was only sharing my tears with myself, because I hadn't yet understood my proper contradiction. Because you see, her mouth feeds me nectar with each kiss, and her tongue whips my passion to a frenzy, till I can no longer see or politicize, till I can no longer offer a coherent treatise on what is really politically correct. I could care less, because all I know is that at the moment that she possesses me fully and completely, I'd be mighty pissed if she didn't take me and possess me, have me, make me a muddy, wet pool of acquiescence, a vessel that smells of her skin and makes me want her over and over, and not just in my bed. And she'll have me panting and sweating and aching like a bitch in heat. And I tell you this, I'd be a bitch if she didn't come see about me.
So I think this is probably a pretty good time to take a break, huh? I want to call your attention to the refreshment table. You might be needing some fine refreshments. And take a look at the exhibits, and we'll give you plenty of time. And let's do it.
My point to everyone at great
See, I've got this album in my
mainstream media. And you know what?
Oh no, because it's in the living room, right in the record case. And it's like your friends would come over and go through all the albums. They're like, no!
So they hid it, huh? We are going to take it. Nobody put us down. Checked out if you're a member of Herbert Hart Library.
Okay, and how much is the membership?
It's $25 a year. Membership.
Oh, that is so cute.
That is available for purchase at Women and Children First Bookstore. I think and people like us. And the 10% discount. Oh, yeah. If you join Herbert Hart Library, I think that we're definitely on our way.
Yeah, I agree.
There's going to be a day when I'm not afraid to go to any restaurant and wear my big dyke shirt. That's one of the... Now it's kind of like, okay, I'll wear this one. Nobody knows what it means, you know.
I just want to have it in my life.
It will.
Yeah.
It's a good book, especially when you're unfortunately there aren't a lot of them. I think they've got a much better chance. So that's kind of the classic.
Much better than 10 years ago.
Yes, I saw the night. But I think also just in general, people are... It's neat that they've put it on their reading list. I mean, I've never heard gay and lesbian mentioned more often than I have in this political campaign. That's a major step. And we're gonna do it. And it will. I think it will happen.
Yeah.
In our lifetime. Yes, it's gonna be there.
Yes.
It's gonna be the reason we fought this long. Yes. Memberships and donations. Yes. Whoa. Yeah, they don't do it. They're just kind of fun, fluff mysteries. So yeah, you told me this. It's very distressing.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, I don't know. Thank you very much.
The videotape of the evening, like I said before, is for sale. The order blanks are on the table. They cost $14. There's two options for delivery. One, you can have it delivered by first-class mail for $3 more, or you can pick up your videotape here on October 10th. That's the night of the Karen Williams performance, so you're going to be here anyway. And then let's go. Are there any other important announcements from the floor? Yes? No? Okay. The next storyteller is Carmen Abrego. She wants you to know that she's 38 years old. She is a Mexican Chicana lesbian writer. Her work has appeared in Third Woman Press, Naming the Daytime Moon and Heresies, other places I expect. She has received the CAAP Award 2 years in a row from the city of Chicago. Her chapbook will be out in November 1992, entitled Mexican Homemade Poems and Other Stories. And tonight she's going to tell us a story about the importance of going beyond the kiss.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the producers and everyone in the coffee house, from the coffee person, the coffee maker, and cookie maker. Coming out. As a writer, every time I do a reading, I come out. I come out to the audience, whether they be lesbians or straight people. It is that responsibility that I put upon myself to inform the public that I am a Mexican Chicana lesbian. And what keeps me going is the words of other writers, not necessarily lesbian writers, but women of color writers. Writers like Ana Castillo, Sharima Raga, Sandra Cisneros, of course, but also friends who are there to support you. Regardless whether you're sometimes too abrasive, on an ego trip sometimes, they're there to tell you, stop doing it. And because of this support system, I'm able to express how I feel, why I feel that way, and what I'm going to do about it. And without this support system of friends, lesbians, white lesbians, lesbians of color, I am able to write, or perhaps I should say I have that privilege, that liberty to express my feelings. But in order to get them out there are support systems such as the coffee house, as bookstores as Women and Children First, journals such as Third Woman Press, Heresies, Kitchen Table Press. These are my support systems. And that is what keeps me going. But at the same time, the title of this thing is Going Beyond the Kiss, going beyond the orgasm. As a lesbian, I want to go beyond that. And as I speak tonight, I know someone is coming out in West Humboldt Park, in the Pilsen area, in South Chicago, or on the North Side. And that baby dyke, adult, a woman with children, will be looking for a support system. And it is my responsibility as a Chicana lesbian, a lesbian of color, to be able to listen to these women, to tell them there are support systems. And all we have to do is listen. And if we listen to them, we can hear ourselves sometimes. And every time we listen, we come out together. Thank you.
Georgette Harper, well, she wants to tell us, well, I'll let her tell you what she's going to tell us. But Georgette wants you to know that she grew up in New York City and has lived in Chicago for 12 years. Her news stories, feature articles, reviews, and interviews have appeared in over 30 lesbian and gay publications. She's a regular contributor to Hotwire magazine, and her lesbian humor column, Lesbomania, appears in Nightlines and Outlines in Chicago and in gay papers in Miami, Boston, and Washington, D.C. This year she's read selections from Lesbomania at the Bailiwick Theater in Chicago, the Begin, a women-only cafe in Berlin, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, the House of Women in Paris, I pronounced that right, and the Lesbian and Gay Community Center in New York. Here's Georgette Harper.
Thanks. It's so nice that the coffee house is open again. I'm really glad. This is the first night and I have a chance to be part of it. What I'm going to read is something that, part of this appeared as a column, Lesbomania column, and part of it is new material that I've added. And it's called Girl Scouts Forever. It was at Girl Scout camp, the adolescent girl's introduction to women-only space, that I fell in love for the first time. I was 14 and Bunky was 18. She was one of my counselors. I was a cigarette-puffing, working-class street kid to whom a tree was a foreign object, and she was a bright-faced, farm-fed baby butch from the western hinterlands. Obviously, it was doomed from the start. But oh, how we'd stay up for hours by the romantic campfire light, long after the other campers had gone to bed. Bunky was a Mormon of all things. She liked to talk about polygamy and angels and the afterlife and the visions of Brigham Young. I was a teenage atheist, and I talked about evolution, the incomprehensibility of the vast mysteries of the universe, and the utter fallacy of all organized religion. We argued our divergent cosmological views in passionate intellectual discourse, as only two young, horny lesbians who don't know they're lesbians yet can do. Then, a tragic separation. I was advanced to another unit, and Bunky was no longer my counselor. But she'd show up at my new tent site late each night, secretly hiking through the woods without her flashlight so she wouldn't be seen, a quiver with some new theological argument she felt we urgently needed to discuss. And every night, I got a goodnight kiss before Bunky dissolved back into the dark woods. Now, we aren't talking Stonewall here, but Stone Age. This was 1962. I, who thought I was so smart, had no idea such promising possibilities as lesbianism existed among the vast mysteries of the universe I was always talking about. And picture Bunky, this adorable butch number, wondering at 18 when she was going to start getting interested in boys, so she could join some patriarch's harem in Utah. And the two of us giving each other wide-eyed, longing looks. Well, of course we were noticed. Some administrator called Bunky to the headquarters cabin and forbid her to talk to me anymore. We both felt outraged. It was so unfair. All we'd been doing was trying to sort out the true nature of the universe. Sheesh, what did they think we were doing? A light began to dawn. What? Could it be? Was it possible? Now, I can't exactly credit the Girl Scouts with putting this idea in our heads, but by trying to cover it up, they definitely gave things a boost. Defiant, our secret meetings became all the more romantically charged. At the end of the summer, Bunky tearfully pressed her yellow Girl Scout tie into my hand and went off to South America to work for the Peace Corps. She came to visit me once back home in New York, just before she left for Bolivia or Uruguay, I really don't remember. And she took me out to the World's Fair in Flushing, where we sheepishly held hands as she showed me around the Mormon pavilion. When I got home, probably moony-eyed, my mother said with alarm, "That's the counselor you're always talking about. She doesn't even look like a girl." You got it, Ma. But I was scared to death by the enormous gulf between the messages society was giving me and the messages I was getting from my raging libido whenever I thought about Bunky. I had no context back then in which my lesbian feelings made sense to me, and I didn't know anybody else who felt them. I never heard of Ann Bannon and Bevo Brinker. Women in my high school who I've since discovered were lesbians kept themselves very quiet. They were scared too. In high school, I hung out with the beatniks in Greenwich Village, and I had gay male friends, but I still had almost no contact with lesbians, at least none who were out. I never saw Bunky again, and I put all that away. I took on the project of being heterosexual, almost with a vengeance, you might say. I even got married. For me, it wasn't until the women's liberation movement that I began to wake up out of this weird patriarchal sexual identity amnesia thing and remember those feelings and reconnect with myself. Maybe this is why, to this day, I never entirely believe it when a woman tells me she's straight. I've been out now for many years, but it was only 2 years ago, 28 years after that innocent, sweet lesbo summer romance, that I finally said those explosive little words to my mother, "I'm a lesbian." Believe it or not, my mother was shocked, speechless. She really was. I could see the wheels spinning around in her head, and after what seemed like forever, she narrowed one eye and said, "That camp counselor." The persistence of memory. But if my mother was looking for a place to put blame, I know it was a gift. Bunky gave me my first inkling of the real nature, not of the universe that we argued about so passionately, but about myself. I hope that today, wherever she is, she remembers me in that way too.
I never went to camp. I got here anyway, though. Jackie Edenbach. She's going to talk about something really important. She's going to talk about work. It's something we spend a few hours a day doing. She's a 44-year-old dyke from a small town in the Midwest. And here she is, Jackie Edenbach.
Definitely from a small town in the Midwest, 6,500 people. It's where I was born, it's where my father was born, it's where my grandfather was born, it's where I made the mistake of coming out. In Fox, we're supposed to do a lot of things, but being a lesbian wasn't one of them. Anybody out there who's from a small town knows what they're like, but for those of you who aren't, I'll tell you. An example from when I was in high school, I was 17 and I had my father's car, and one of the rules was that I wasn't allowed to pick anybody up on my way to school. So it's a cold December day, I'm 8 blocks from home, nobody can see me, and I picked up 2 friends from school. It was 2 minutes from that spot to school. By the time I walked in the door, my mother was on the phone to the school principal saying, "What do you mean you're picking people up on the way to school? You know you're not supposed to do that." Now, if people got excited about me picking up 2 people on the way to school, can you imagine what they did when I came out as a lesbian? Within 2 weeks, it was all over town, and it had come back to me that if I looked at anybody's mother, sister, daughter, or wife, they would run me out of town on a rail, and they meant it. I spent the first 2 years that I was out in that town, and then my parents got a divorce. I was 25, and I handled it like any sensible, mature adult. I ran away from home. So years later, I'm in therapy, and I'm telling my therapist about this, and she said, "You were 25. When one is 25, one does not need to run away from home." And I looked at her and I said, "Look, I took the clothes on my back, my father's 26-year-old fiance, and I ran away from home." If you were a 56-year-old man and you had a 26-year-old fiance, would you tell your 25-year-old dyke daughter to take her out and show her a good time? He didn't speak to me for 2 years over that. And he never left me alone with a girlfriend of his again. I don't know why. Well, at the end of my running away from home, I lucked out and wound up in Streeter, Illinois, living in a boarding house communal living space that was run by a heterosexual woman who liked to surround herself with lesbians because that way she didn't have any competition for the boys. And that was a nice situation, right? You know, we had a family there, but nicer than that is they sent me to a factory in Ottawa to get a job. And the place is Borg and Beck, and we made clutches for everything. I applied for the job, I got the job, I walked in, there's 4 dykes sitting at the first table in the cafeteria. was like, oh my God, they don't disappear when they walk out of the bars. They really exist out in real life. We formed our family, those five dykes there. And there was Sharon and Tootie, who were the old married couple. They'd been together 7 years. They were buying a house, raising a kid, worrying about the plumbing and how do you pay the bills. And Tootie was the oldest of us all. She was from Macomb. She was very stable. She was the dad. Sharon was the most sensible of us all, and she was the mom. Then there was Carol Jo. She was about 3 years older than I, and you all know one. You all know the dyke who's the cock of the walk, who thinks she's the goddess's gift to women. That kind. Strutter. Hey, that was Carol Jo. There was Bobby, who was the single, sensible dyke. She was buying a house. She was very calm and settled down. She later ran away with one of the boss's wives. And then there was me. I was the dumb kid. Everybody took care of me, especially Sharon. She just kind of took me under her wing. No, Jackie, don't look at that one. She's, no, Jackie, you can't look at that one. She belongs to so-and-so. She kept me alive. In small towns when you come out, especially in a closed community like that, the first thing they say to you is, are you a butch or are you a femme? And you better decide right then. If you're a butch, they assign you a number. And then when somebody decides to be a femme and you have that number, you get her. Not quite that bad, but soft close. So Sharon kept me out of trouble because I wouldn't tell anybody whether I was a butch or a femme. One time I'd show up in the bar with a butch, the next time I'd show up with a femme, and then just to be ornery, I'd show up with a man, and it just really freaked them out. So we had our community, we had our family there, but when I was thinking about talking about this tonight and what helped me through, it wasn't just that family that the lesbians there created. I have to give credit to the heterosexual people we worked with, because I realized all of a sudden that they just accepted us. When Sharon and Tootie had a fight, everybody in the factory was upset. They were really worried. Are they going to get back together? Is it going to be okay? When Carol Jo's appendix ruptured, everybody in the factory was out there supporting her and supporting her lover. When I got involved with a married woman, one of the older women I worked with took me aside and put her arm around my shoulder, and she said, Jackie, we know you care about Lynn, but remember, she's married, and we don't want you to get hurt. And that was they really cared. They didn't want me to get hurt. It didn't matter that I was a lesbian, but it did matter that I was involved with a married woman, and they didn't want me to get hurt. And that same summer, there was this woman I worked with, they called her Little Jackie, and they called me Mean Jackie, because I was bigger than her. I wasn't that much bigger, so I couldn't be Big Jackie, but I could be Mean Jackie. And Little Jackie and I worked next to one another, and we built clutches. She was building these little clutches, and I was building clutches for buses. And every once in a while when I was working, I would, at the end of the assembly process, we did something to keep people from readjusting the clutches in the field, and every once in a while I would slip with my hammer, and I'd hit my hand. And I would say, son of a bitch. And she was French. And she's standing right beside me, and she's like, son of a bitch, son of a bitch, son of a bitch. And she just, but that year, after I'd gotten involved with Lynn, we were at the company picnic, and Lynn's husband was there because they hadn't gotten a divorce yet. And little Jackie decided that it was her responsibility to take care of me because she didn't want me upset because Bill was there. So at some point during the day, she conned me out of my jacket because she was cold. And then she came over, and her husband was running around someplace. She came over and she said, you're cold too, and I don't want you to worry about Lynn. So she sat on my lap for the rest of the afternoon. It was that kind of acceptance. It was that kind of, you're okay just because you're you. It doesn't matter what you do when you walk out of that factory. In here, you do your job. You're our friend. We care. That's what got me through. Thank you.
All right.
Jackie Anderson is an African-American American lesbian, separatist, and sometimes butch. Here's Jackie Anderson.
Hi. What I decided today to talk about, or to sort of read about, because I have to do this in some orderly fashion or I can't do it at all, is the experience for me that brought home to me what it really was going to mean to be a lesbian. Because for me, coming out, I knew what some parts of it would mean. I was very prepared for a lot of the kinds of harassment that we have to deal with. But there was this one experience that I had that represented the whole story of what being lesbian meant. When I was asked to tell a story concerning something that helped me to get through, I began to think about my life, both before and after coming out. While there have certainly been difficult periods during both times, there has been one consistent crisis that began when I came out and persists to this day, and that is using the ladies' room. I've discussed this with some of my friends and lovers and found that I'm not alone. The need to use the washroom when in a public place is the only event in my life that has been a constant source of anxiety. This rather ordinary event has for me become significant far beyond all reason and requires all of the coping skills that I have learned during my life. It has also come to represent in a personal sense a kind of lesbian norm, similar to the black norm written about many years ago in a book entitled Black Rage. The black norm is a level of paranoia that would be considered abnormal for a white person, but perfectly normal for an African American. Well, I feel the lesbian norm, the urge to use the washroom in a public place when not accompanied by another lesbian, arouses feelings of paranoia in me that others might consider overblown. I do not. Others do not have to contend with strange looks upon exiting a stall or indignant stares at the door. I cannot ever remember feeling the need to be accompanied to the washroom in my life until I came out. The first time that I was challenged, I was quite confused. I went toward the ladies' room and was challenged at the door by a woman who said with great indignity, "This is the ladies' room," as if I were intruding on sacred ground. I looked at her and replied, "I am a lady," which was a lie. So I decided that that was not the appropriate response. However, this alerted me to the fact that I was going to have to deal with this situation again. I did as I always do when confronted with a crisis. I held a long conversation with myself. This strategy has never yet failed me. I first imagined some scenarios of confrontation and responses to them ranging from the most satisfying to the most rational. In this case, the most satisfying was also the most aggressive. When I construct something satisfying, I say it out loud to see how it feels. It felt good, so I repeated it a few times out loud. It felt even better. However, I knew that I would probably not be able to do what was most satisfying just because it required such an aggressive act. It was necessary, however, to imagine what might be considered an overreaction by some in order to neutralize the extreme anger that I felt at being challenged and the frustration of not responding originally in a way that pleased me. I was completely unprepared for this situation, since none of my dyke friends had ever mentioned to me that this might happen. I was in readiness for the more standard and traditional homophobic actions. I was not prepared for this. The value, however, of imagining something aggressive that I couldn't carry through was that it soothed me to think about it. I could then shift to things less satisfying, but more reasonable and realistic. I didn't want to overreact and provide the opportunity to be dismissed as crazy. I wanted them to feel crazy for challenging me. By the end of the process, I had a repertoire of responses for future reference. This has served to lower, though not completely erase, the level of anxiety that is aroused when I am alone in a public place and must use the washroom. Thank you.
Yeah, that's definitely a problem. But I didn't, I forgot. I seem to be forgetting a lot. Sarah Hoagland is the next storyteller. She said that she came out in 1975 after being labeled PDOF. Anybody know what that means? I didn't either. I'm glad she wrote the translation here. Potential dyke on faculty. She was labeled that by her students, her lesbian students, the year before, and she named herself a separatist the following year in 1976. She moved to Chicago in 1977, and well, here she is, Sarah Hoagland.
As this is a benefit for Sinister Wisdom, I was asked to tell a little bit about Sinister Wisdom and my past with it. And I would say that that was the single most important thing in the early years for me that sustained me, was my connection with Sinister Wisdom and with lesbian words. Deirdre McCall and I were lovers for 11 years. Of those 11 years, we lived together one. And she was becoming a singer-songwriter, and I was becoming a writer, philosopher. There were so many other things that sustained us and helped us go on in what we were doing. And Sinister Wisdom was at the center of that for both of us. I was a contributing editor for Sinister Wisdom from 1978 until 1981, when Adrienne Rich and Michelle Cliff took over. And at that time, they took off the logo for the lesbian imagination in all women. That affected all of us, I think, who were connected at the time. I was out at my unit at Northeastern here from the time I got here in 1977, and I got tenure as an out lesbian. And what sustained me through that and everything else that I was doing was, at that time, Sinister Wisdom, and everything connected with lesbian words and lesbian writing. Julia Penelope and I edited the issue 15, Sinister Wisdom 15, on lesbians and violence. And the story behind that is this. There was a conference on women and violence in New York, and Susan Brown-Miller was up on the stage talking and kept on about women and violence. And a woman named Frog stood up in the audience and said, "I don't understand why heterosexual women keep talking about men and violence and they go home and fuck them." And Susan Brown-Miller absolutely lost it and said, "Well, you're dressing like a man anyway." And things deteriorated from there. And Julia and I did the issue because we were tired of lesbians being subsumed under the category woman, and we felt that lesbians experienced violence in ways that heterosexual women did not. And that's where that issue came from, and we dedicated it to Frog. I went on after my tenure with Sinister Wisdom to write Lesbian Ethics and to co-edit for Lesbians Only. Julia and I did that. We started in 83, 84, and it was particularly difficult as separatism was fairly seriously under attack. And yet what sustained me was having all these words and all these lesbians writing words and writing, using their imagination to break beyond the bounds and the binds that we grew up with. And I want to read just quickly something that Harriet Ellenberger wrote, who was one of the founding mothers of Sinister Wisdom in the retrospect. She says, "What I remember most about doing Sinister Wisdom with Catherine, and what I loved most, is that we were operating at the very edge of possibility." A phrase I stole from Catherine. She says all these wonderful things and then doesn't write them down. There were many who poured their energy and their heart into Sinister Wisdom during those years, Lee Starr perhaps most of all. But for me, Catherine was always at the center, the one who made it go, the one who risked the most, the one who paid the highest price. I remember her sending me to my room to write notes for a magazine for issue 1, and when I came out approximately 3 days later, terrified, speechless of what I had written, she read them, blanched, and said, "Perfect, they'll go in just like that." She was kissing her past life goodbye, and she knew it. Which brings me to the subject of love, since courage requires it. It was an act of love, Sinister Wisdom. That's the only way I can describe its root, its origin, its essential character. It grew out of those endless dusk-to-dawn conversations between us, which were a form of lovemaking themselves, and which were motivated by a mutual love for the world, to put it bluntly. The world, the earth, her people, her creatures, everything that walks, swims, crawls, slithers, flies, breathes, squeaks, shouts, sings, speaks. For me, Sinister Wisdom was never really about lesbian community. It was never really about art or politics either, since, for starters, the distinction between the two is not clear to me. It was about transformation, nothing less. It was about releasing the power of passionate love between women through language and image, words and pictures, with the intent of saving the earth and her creatures, including ourselves, from destruction. I want to say it is never, ever okay to put lesbianism on the back burner. It is never, ever okay to ask us to go back in the closets or put our identity second to anything. And I think we need to just keep remembering that. Thank you.
Well, that's it for tonight, folks. I want to thank all the storytellers. Please. And I just got to say that it's events like this that sustain me. And thanks. Good night.
It's on right now. Yes, it is. Oh, you just turned it on? Yep.